One thing I do want to say is I'd like to thank our breakfast sponsor, Daniel Rankel. Did I get it right? Yes, the Irish Breed. The last time Daniel was here, we had a bit of a challenge meeting. Today it looks to be a little bit calmer. So thank you for being here again, and thank you to our board for having him come back again and giving him an opportunity to speak. Now, our mission statement. The mission of the West LA Chamber is to enhance opportunities for members of the West Los Angeles business community through referral, advocacy, doesn't want to come out this morning, and education. So, thank you. And the purpose of our breakfast is we're here this morning to further West Los Angeles business community's interests on local, county, state, and federal levels, while concurrently facilitating and providing guidance in networking opportunities. We hope to assist all our members achieve their business goals through education, advocacy, and networking. I'd also like to say welcome to our guest today. Daniel, thank you. Thank you for being here. Who invited you today?
Bryce.
Bryce, thank you for doing that. Always a good thing to invite people to our chamber meeting. All right. Mr. Green, we just sort of blast through everything today. We have our business impact legislation presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Ted Green. I'm a public affairs consultant. I want to give you a little report on legislation in Sacramento. I think everyone here knows the state legislature adjourned for the year on September 13th. So they can't do any more damage until they come back. In January. We're in the period of time now where the governor has a month to sign or veto bills that are passed by the legislature. So basically, by October 13th, he will have to act on every bill. If the governor chooses not to act on a bill, it becomes law without his signature. So it's kind of the opposite, if anyone's familiar with the pocket veto on the federal level, which is the president can veto a bill passed by Congress simply by not acting on it. It's actually the opposite in California. No action by the governor, a bill becomes law. So I wanted to update you on a few bills that we've talked about at the August meeting, the calm part. I got to go. I was happy to be early on the agenda in August, so it was the calm part of the August meeting. AB 161 is the bill we talked about that dealt with paper receipts. Basically would have required businesses that offer paper receipts as part of their course of business to install new payment systems. That bill failed in the Senate and so did not go to the governor. AB 1066 we talked about. That's the bill that would have extended unemployment benefits for people who are on strike. Currently, unemployment benefits exist for people who, no fault of their own, are out of a job, and employers pay unemployment insurance so that those benefits are available to people who lose their jobs. This bill would have allowed those who choose to go on strike to receive unemployment benefits and would have inevitably increased the cost of unemployment insurance for employers. That bill, too, failed in the Senate and did not get out of the legislature. In August, there was a presentation from a representative from UCLA who talked about ACA 14. That would have been a constitutional amendment specifically targeting University of California, so UCLA as well as all of the other University of California campuses would have put restrictions on their ability to contract out for certain services, and if it had passed the legislature, would have gone on the ballot next November to be voted on by the people. All constitutional amendments have to be approved by the voters, but that didn't pass the legislature, so that bill is also not moving forward. The fourth bill that we talked about, which was one of the most controversial issues the legislature dealt with this year, was AB 5. That has to do with independent contracting. There was a California Supreme Court decision that basically threw out the decades-old guidelines that established whether a worker should be considered an employee or could be considered an independent contractor. And AB 5 was a legislative attempt to basically codify that Supreme Court decision and make it very, very difficult for anyone, almost anyone, to work as an independent contractor. That bill did pass. It was signed by the governor. Over the course of the year, there was a lot of lobbying on the bill, and certain industries were able to get themselves exempted from this new law. Industries is a broad term, but folks like stockbrokers, direct sellers like Avon Lady, Tupperware salespeople, Herbalife, hairstylists, kind of a long list of people who were able to carve out exemptions for themselves. However, there were a number of categories where there was significant lobbying to try to get exempted that did not get exempted. Independent truckers is a good example. And basically the dividing line was, this was California Labor Federation's #1 bill. It was their top priority. And if you were in an industry where they think there's an opportunity to organize workers to extend labor's reach, you did not get an exemption. On the other hand, if you are in a category where labor doesn't really think there are organizing opportunities, then you're able to get an exemption. The most high-profile fight over this bill involves kind of a brand new part of our economy, app-based work. Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, Postmate delivery people, DoorDash, and they are, in the view of the legislature, covered by this bill. The legislature believes that Uber and Lyft and similar companies are going to have to treat their workers, their drivers, as employees. Those companies, of course, furiously lobbied against that. They offered kind of a third alternative, so neither employee nor independent contractor, with kind of a hybrid in between. The legislature did not buy that, did not include that. Those three companies, Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash, have put $90 million into a campaign account, and they say they're going to take the issue to the voters next year. We'll see if that happens or not. In the meantime, the governor has said he would like to continue negotiating on the issue, not only for app-based employees, but for other categories of workers. And basically everyone who didn't get the exemption they wanted this year is already lining up in Sacramento to fight for it next year. So that's an issue that is going to be ongoing in the legislature, maybe at the ballot box, and undoubtedly in the courts. I just wanted to quickly touch on three issues that I want to put on your radar screen that I think are going to be considerable legislative issues, both in Sacramento and perhaps here locally in 2020. The first is predictive scheduling. Predictive scheduling has to do with the issue of how much notice must an employer give a shift an employee of their future work schedule. So employees working in retail, working in restaurants, other shift employees, they complain, there's been a complaint that they only get their schedules a few days ahead of time, and it doesn't allow them to plan their lives. So the legislative response is to mandate as much as 2 weeks notice for schedules for employees. The challenge with that, I'll give you an example. I know a restaurateur who runs a barbecue restaurant in the San Fernando Valley, and he recently got an order right before school started from a local school. They were having all their teachers coming back, all the staff coming back. They wanted his restaurant to cater lunch that day. They gave him 2 days notice. He was able to take the order, and everyone was happy. If predictive scheduling had been in place, it was a big order for him, a small restaurant. he probably wouldn't have been able to take that order because he couldn't have the staff in place on 2 days' notice to fulfill the order. So that's not good for the school, not good for him, not good for the employees who would get the extra work because he had more business come in the door. The other way to look at it is, if I'm an employee and I decide, I need to take 3 days from now, I need the day off, and I go to my boss and say, hey boss, can I take off 3 days from now, and Joe is willing to fill in my shift, my employer may not be able to accommodate that wish because Joe didn't have a 2-week notice that he would have hours 3 weeks from today. So I'm disappointed because I don't get the day off that I want. Joe doesn't get the extra hours that he was excited about having, and the employer has, an unhappy circumstance. So that is already an issue that is brewing at LA City Hall, and we may see it statewide with the legislature. The soda tax, Assemblymember Bloom has already said he's going to bring back a proposal to tax soda in California. He wants to raise money to fight obesity, childhood obesity, and other health concerns that he believes comes from excess sugar in our diets. This is an issue that's particularly important to restaurants, bars, hotels, others who sell soda that they produce by buying the syrup. Because the way the tax in the past has been proposed is it would be a tax on the fluid ounce finished product. So you may buy a 5-gallon bag of syrup, but your tax isn't on 5 gallons. It's on however many hundreds of ounces that finished product you would sell. So for instance, I know a bar owner in West Hollywood, he's done the math for himself. It basically, this tax, as proposed, would double his cost for the soda that he buys, the syrup that he buys and resells as soda. So it could really affect a lot of businesses' bottom lines. And finally, housing. Obviously, homeless is top of mind for all of us. Housing is a big issue. The legislature took some baby steps to address the housing crisis. The tension between local control and the local government's right to approve or reject housing projects versus the statewide need to build more housing surely is going to be an issue the legislature will be faced with again in 2020. Although, as you all know, in 2020, every member of the state legislature is up for re-election and half of the state senate is up for re-election. It's tougher to do controversial stuff in an election year. Having said all that, I should also point out kind of the obvious, which is we're in an era where it's really impossible to predict what's going to be around the corner in terms of public policy, kind of an era of uncertainty. So that's my best guess on 2020, but I really wouldn't bank on much of it. Yeah?
Question, did anything happen with the commercial property in terms of those being, in terms of Prop 13 being listed commercial properties?
So the question is about what's commonly called split roll, which is, as you all know, Prop 13 went into effect and was passed in 1978 and put a cap on the rate of property tax and limited the growth in the assessed value for taxation of both residential and commercial property until the property is resold. And there has been discussion and an effort to treat commercial property in the future differently than residential property. So the answer is the folks who want to put split roll on the ballot next November spent millions of dollars and collected sufficient signatures to put it on the ballot. Then their polling showed what they qualified for the ballot wasn't likely to win. So they decided to sort of throw that out and start again. So they're in the process of qualifying a second initiative with sufficient funding. They still have time to qualify something for next November. Will their polling be any better based on the tweaks they've made to the measure? I don't know. As you know, Californians are resistant to more taxes, and you can make the argument that, it's just the big property owners that will pay this tax, we all know, I mean, ultimately, it's
Even tenants.
the tenants or the customers of the tenants, I mean, the money has to come from somewhere. So so the legislature didn't do anything on it this year. We'll see what happens in 2020.
Is there anyone carrying a bill to deal with the use of handicap
Handicap,
permits?
oh, for parking?
Yeah.
I haven't heard of any legislative issues to deal with that. Yeah, Milan.
Independent,
Yeah.
is there anything that changes the annual amount for those that are not exempt, I'm sorry, for those that are exempt?
So it's not based on like a dollar amount with one exception. It has to do with, is the person controlled by the employer? Does the contractor, is the service offered by the contractor the same as the service offered by the business? Because if it is, they're not an independent contractor. And third, does the independent contractor have their own business? Which is a problem for like Lyft or Uber drivers, because that's not their business. Where there is kind of a calculation based on salary, sort of, is freelance writers. And so what the bill says is freelance writers can be independent and write, don't quote me on this number, but it's like up to 32 submissions. And after 32 submissions, you have to be an employee. And what I've read in freelance writers who are submitting like newspapers and stuff like that, they say 32 is nothing. They'll blow through that in the first month and a half, depending on what they're doing.
One more question. The entire nation is looking at California with respect to the CCPA, is it? The
Consumer Privacy Act.
Right. Has there been any challenges that you know of that it's going to come as soon as it starts off the bat? Can you tell us a little bit?
Just kind of going back to 2018, a developer in San Francisco named Alistair McTaggart, it's like one of the all-time great names. Alistair McTaggart threatened to put an initiative on the ballot that he said would significantly increase consumer privacy on the internet. Those who do business on the internet said, wait, this is going to fundamentally change our ability to advertise effectively and operate the way we're operating. And the challenge with an initiative is once it's passed by the voters, it can only be changed by the voters unless the initiative says something else. So they're relatively inflexible. And one thing that we can all agree about the internet is it's evolving and changing every day. So, faced with an initiative threat, the legislature really jammed through in 2018 kind of a comprehensive bill called the California Consumer Privacy Act that sought to provide enough privacy regulations that McTaggart would back down with his initiative. And that's exactly what happened. That bill is scheduled to go into effect January 1st, 2020, which is what Nima was asking about. So there was a lot of effort this year in the legislature to amend the bill. Things like making sure that frequent flyer programs can continue, making sure that businesses don't have to, businesses are required to provide consumers a way to contact them, but it should be a reasonable requirement, not an over requirement. There's a long list of bills. Almost none of them got through. They were blocked in the Judiciary Committee of the Assembly or the Senate, and there were very minor modifications made to the California Consumer Privacy Act, and it is going to go into effect January 1st, 2020. I imagine we'll still see efforts to try to reform it, but I think we're going to see the impacts of it. Is someone ready to go to court and fight it? I don't know the answer. Thank you very much.
Great information. Lovely to hear that California isn't looking at any of the other states that have repealed their soda taxes, and they're going to bring that back in again. So one more time, I'd like to thank Daniel Rangel, the artistry of real estate, for sponsoring and being involved in the West LA Chamber breakfast this morning. And now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring him up to the front, and we have our sponsor presentation. Daniel's going to talk to us give us another story. I don't know if you all remember the other story about Jesus straight.
The hecklers, I think they
Well,
remember.
they remember the
They
hecklers.
remember the hecklers a lot more.
Yeah.
I actually
Very short.
enjoyed it. How's everyone doing? Good? Good, look at that, you guys are awake, I like it. Well, my name's Daniel, real estate agent, and as a real estate agent, I'm supposed to promote homeownership, right? That's the idea. But to be honest, I really don't see anything wrong with paying rent where you live. In fact, in some cases, I think this works out just fine. I mean, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, right? Bill lives in Venice Beach. He pays about $3,000 a month. He loves skateboarding. He has dreadlocks in this hypothetical situation, right? Yeah. There we go. So I'm not too far off. Okay. He lives in Venice Beach. He's paying about $3,000 a month. It's not a big place, but he really doesn't care because he's right by the beach. Beautiful girls, coffee shops, all the stuff that Bill is into. But Bill gets sick and tired of every realtor and everybody else telling him how he's wasting his money by paying rent. That he's only making his landlord rich, right? The classic. Stop making your landlord rich. So Bill's like, hell no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going straight to the bank. He goes to the bank, he applies for a loan. It comes back that he qualifies for $600,000, which is a lot less than what Bill would need to be able to purchase in Venice Beach, where he loves to live. So, well, here's the reality. On monthly terms, it is cheaper to pay rent in an expensive neighborhood than it is to pay the mortgage in an expensive neighborhood. That same place that he's paying $3,000 a month, if we were to pay the mortgage on that, it'd be many times more. So Bill's in this situation like, oh my God, what do I do? Do I, one, do nothing, keep paying rent, keep making the landlord rich, or two, does Bill move to an area where he doesn't want to move to, where he hates it, but hey, he can afford it, so guess what? Bill sucks it up because what? Homeownership is the way to go. Unfortunately, for too many people, it is one or the other. They either decide to not do anything and keep paying rent, and then they're retiring and they're like, oh my God, I wish I would have bought something sooner. Or they sacrifice their lifestyle, they move to an area where they don't want to move to, they're miserable for the rest of their lives, but hey, at retirement, Bill has something. But it doesn't have to be this way. What about staying in Venice Beach, Bill, where you like to live, skateboard, surf, dreadlocks, do your stuff, don't sacrifice your lifestyle, and at the same time, buy a property in an area where you can afford a single-family residence, a duplex, or a triplex, and renting it out. The benefits of doing this are two. One, you can use, depending obviously on your down payment, and as time allows and cash flow increases, you can use the rental income from this property where you don't want to live to help you pay the rent or subsidize the rent in the area where you do want to live, right? So that's one. Two, the other benefit of doing something like this is by having this property that you don't want to live in, but hey, you have it, you're actually increasing the likelihood, Bill, that one day in the future, you will be able to buy your dream home. And this can happen in one of two ways. One, you keep this property, it goes up in value, bam, you sell it, you take the money and put that as a down payment for the property where you do want to live. Or two, you keep this property, it's an income-producing property. With time, as rental rates go up, cash flow increases, lenders will consider the rental income from this property, you don't want to live in, Bill, but you got it, as qualifying income for your dream home. And again, as rental rates go up, as cash flow increases, with time, it's only increasing your purchasing power on this dream home, right? Rental rates keep going up every year in Los Angeles. 4% this year, by the way, for those who are in rent control, Los Angeles. Last year it was 3%. So the thing is, here's the reality. It is easier to buy an investment property first and then your dream home than it is to buy your dream home and then an investment property. While many times this dream home actually holds you back from qualifying for more because most of the time it just produces debt. If you look at the market and you kind of see like, okay, this property is selling a single family residence in Santa Monica, and you see how much it costs, how much the mortgage is, but then you see how much you could rent it for, it's typically going to be most of the time a lot less than what the mortgage or the expense is, right? So it's harder to start off with that dream home, vice versa, the income property can actually help you on the other end. But like, this isn't for everyone. I am a landlord, and sometimes I just want to shoot myself in the face. Because tenants do drive you crazy. It is a job. You run into it, you keep getting calls, they're blocking the driveway, you give them a notice, you can't really give them a notice, then the tow truck, you call the tow truck company, the lights turn on, and then they move their car, and the tow truck company can't do anything about it. So it's one of the options, right? Something to consider. For some people, being a landlord is not going to work out. Then you probably do want to wait to see when you can find your single family residence. But whatever the goal is, I'm a real estate agent. I specialize in single family residences as well as apartment buildings, residential income from 2 units and above. So if I could ever be of any help, it would be an honor. Any questions? Yes?
Like the county was trying to pass a rent control ordinance that would limit rents on all houses built after a certain year.
In California?
Yeah, to like 5%, in LA County, 5%. But that would kind of force landlords to raise their rent, even if they didn't want to. They would have to raise the rent in order to keep up with their ability to raise rent.
Yeah.
Is that a concern for a property owner if they buy a rent control building?
Yeah, good question. Good question. So they have the one for the state of California that people were going crazy about. Oh my God, rent control all over California. But if you're in Los Angeles, it's like, that's old news. Like, we've had rent control like since ever. So it's like it applied to a lot of other areas. But yes, when you do have rent control, like, I make it a point to raise the rent every single year. Like, I have to, because if I get set back by a year, one, it will become harder to raise it later or to recapture market rent, but two, it also affects the value of your property. So sometimes you have these properties, they're great, they're in a great location, they're beautiful, they're amazing, but the rents are like at $200. Because the landlord never raised it, and now it's very difficult for him to catch up. And getting a tenant out who's under market rent, that is freaking hard, nearly impossible. At least in Los Angeles, each city is different. So while before a landlord might have been like, oh, I really like this tenant, she's amazing, I think we even might have a thing going on, right? I'm not gonna raise the rent, buy myself some more time. That's not gonna happen anymore. Now it's like you really wanna be on top of it. Yes?
Tell us if it is, and if it is, how much harder it is to qualify for investment property versus if you're gonna live it.
Yeah, your interest rate is gonna be a little higher. So what I did, I bought in kind of like South Central area. This was like during the recession. I bought FHA. I really planned on living there. I lived there for 6 months, and then I'm like, oh no, I gotta move to Venice Beach. So I bought as a first-time home buyer, 3.5% down. My intentions were to live there, but hey, life changes. Oh no, now I have an investment property for 3.5% down with a low interest rate. But that, and then the other is, yeah, it would be a larger down payment. But the reality is, it does cost to invest in real estate. I'm not gonna simplify this and say it's for everyone or it's easy.
LA City Council considering to tax landlords who have the empty units. What do you think about that?
Taxing landlords who have empty units. Yes, there's gotta be a balance. There's gotta be a balance with landlords and tenants. But I think what a lot of tenants don't realize, a lot of these expenses are passed right back to you're running a business. When you buy an income property, you're strictly looking at the numbers. And if the numbers have to make sense because now you're raising the rent because you got a new tax, you're passing it on to the tenants. So the whole idea of making it more difficult on landlords, it's affecting the tenants as well. That's my opinion. Any other questions?
As you pointed out, it's a lot calmer.
Yeah, I didn't
Thank
get it.
you.
I thought I was gonna get a heckler here, but he composed himself.
No,
and
he was all right. Very good. Very good.
Thank you.
Green sugar.
I was gonna actually heckle you, but I'm at Venice Beach.
Yeah.
I'm
And
good.
who wouldn't want to see Dr. Manos with dreadlocks and a skateboard, clam digger pants or whatever they're called now, and, and the black, orange, yellow, and green beanie. What a picture that makes. All right, surfer dude. So I have the pleasure of introducing our next guest, but it's going to take some of your imagination. So I want you to think about the movie Wizard of Oz, all right? And you remember the big tornado that came in and lifted the house? Well, our keynote speaker today hailed from Chicago, the Windy City. And there was a big gust of wind that took him from Chicago and brought him all the way out here to California, into Los Angeles. And he landed at the Veterans Administration. Is the New Directions, the Director of Development. There we go. And his name is Christopher Crawley. So big round of applause. We're going to have him come up. He's going to talk to us about what he does, what the VA does, and how they help our community. Thank you, Christopher.
Wizard of Oz introduction.
See, I thought I'd throw you off.
No place like home, as we all know.
Yeah.
So, thank you. As you mentioned, I'm Chris Crowley. I'm the Director of Development for New Directions for Veterans. We're actually on the VA campus, but we're not affiliated with the VA. We're a separate 501c3 organization. But our main goal and purpose is to work with the homeless veterans in LA County, getting them off the street into programs and services and living in our residential care facility until they go through whatever treatment plans or PTSD issues that they have, any other mental illness issues, and then we find them affordable housing. So they either move into one of our permanent supportive housing locations in Greater Los Angeles, of which we have 6 right now, and we have another 6 being built, which will be open by 2021. Currently, we have about 300 beds that are full in these apartments, and then this will add another 368, so we'll be at almost 700 beds by 2021. And that does not include the 161 beds that we have at our facility on the VA campus, which is Building 116. Maybe we could host a breakfast there sometime. It would be fun. Everybody could see what we do there at New Directions. We have about 84 veterans living with us right now. That can go up to 161, as I mentioned. A lot of that depends on the VA, and when they get to the Welcome Center on the VA campus, then they are assessed as to whether they should go into our program or whether they should go into a program that the Veteran Administration houses, which is called the domicile. domicile. It's a stronger program for substance abuse than what ours is in terms of they're on more of a lockdown, so more of the serious cases. And the guys that come into our program live there for up to 2 years, and we give them those supportive services the whole time they're there. The PTSD treatment that we're working on right now is kind of cutting edge. We have about 25 guys in the program. All of them are reporting after 7 or 8 sessions that they're sleeping better, they're able to manage their anger a little bit better. They don't have those stressors that they have sometimes, and it could be, my boss was in the Iraq here during the Iraq conflicts, and when he gets too warm, he starts to get flashbacks because it was 140 degrees there. And he's not comfortable with that. So he knows that he has to kind of cool himself down one way or another, otherwise it will just kind of continue and continue. So we work with a lot of guys on that type of program, and we're seeing a lot of success. So we do get money from the federal government. We get paid basically a per day basis, per bed for each guy that we have in the program. And that is supposed to cover all the expenses that go into that rehabilitation or that facility, and it doesn't. So what we do as the organization, what I do is we put on different special events throughout the year, try to raise extra money through individual gifts and major gifts and sponsorships through our event. And we actually have an event coming up on Veterans Day weekend. It's Sunday, November 10th at the Skirball Cultural Center. It's our annual Honoring Our Heroes Gala. And at this gala, we are going to be honoring 3 of the veterans that have successfully transferred through our program and are now in permanent supportive housing and being able to support themselves, living the life that they wanted to live when they came back from the service, reuniting themselves with their family members who they may have lost because of their addictions or abuse, or just the fact that they couldn't survive on their own anymore because of their PTSD and there was too much stress in the home. So what we're looking to do is increase membership of the event, sell sponsorships, sell tables, and really kind of embrace the community and have them embrace the work that we're trying to do. We're also honoring 2 organizations. Basically, there's one organization, the American Legion Post 283, which is in Pacific Palisades. They've been significant donors to us over the years, providing mattresses and beds for our vets, smoke alarm systems, fire alarm systems. Currently, they're going to be looking at a new security system for us so that all of our guys will have ID badges that will allow them or not allow them into certain rooms in the building, including the elevator, which we have to redo, and we've asked for. We've got a HHH loan that we've applied for and received, and we're waiting to see when we're going to get those funds and how we can start making some of those changes to make the facility better. But we can't do that alone, and we really need the support of people in this room. If you can afford to buy a table or tickets, you'd like to come and see what we do, we'd love to have you. And really, I'd love to have everybody come over to our organization and see what we do firsthand and take a tour so you can see the important work that we're doing. We all know there's a huge homeless crisis here. We talk about it every day. We see it every day. We're doing the best that we can. We're taking about 300 to 500 vets off the street a year. There's still an estimated about 4,000 vets left, not to mention all the other families that are living on the streets as well. So there are many organizations trying to do great work. We're one of them, and we just appreciate any support that you can give us. Any questions? Yeah.
What percentage of the homeless population do you think has mental illness? Because I hear people say, oh, it's only 4%, it's only 5%, but
No, it's significant.
I think it's more like 50, 60, 70%.
It's probably more than 50 or 60, 70%. And it's higher in certain categories. So there are a lot of younger population who, I don't know if this is true or not, but it feels like they come out here to try to make a living, they're not able to do that, they can't afford to rent, they can't afford to buy, they end up living in the car, they end up living on the street. That's a different type of homeless person than someone that is dealing with mental illness and can't get the services and protection that they need, basically. Most of the vets are service connected, which means they can get benefits from the VA. Some are not. If they were dishonorably discharged due to drugs, which they got addicted to when they were in the service by other service members, they don't bring that over with them to Afghanistan. They get it there, and they get addicted there. So the government's finally starting to realize that there were and are problems when it comes to that, and they're starting to put some money into mental health, the trained staff that give the guys their medication every day, and making sure they're on there. Part of that is also the clinical treatment, so going and talking to a therapist or going to and talking to a psychiatrist, which we are in the process of hiring one on staff here so that we don't have to outsource that to other locations. And eventually what we'll do is we'll be able to bring other vets to us from other agencies, including the VA, and then we can start billing for those services and increase our revenue. But mental illness is the biggest issue.
Do you receive any money from Measure H?
We applied for reservation funding, and just last week, we were kind of redoing our wish list of what we're going to use the money for, mainly completion. So yes, we have those type of money.
You didn't receive it any yet?
We haven't received any money to date, but we are going to, we should be receiving that money.
Have you done anything towards detoxing the individual or just
Yes, we do. We have a program, a 28-day type of program, clinical program that we call it, and they are going through those treatments. If they need the detoxation, then we'll move them to another facility because we're not set up to really handle the hardcore detox. But then once they are in a better place, then they would come back and receive the other services from us and then maintenance on that. It's mostly what we do is alcohol rehab. There are some drug discussions too, but again, if they're really bad, we turn them over to
You were talking about flashbacks. How do you detox that?
the flashbacks.
Yeah.
But it's mostly from the PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder that a lot of the guys have from either being overseas and seeing or participating in what they have to do. I feel like I'm not answering your question though.
Yeah, because the flashbacks are usually in the fatty tissue of the cell. So if you detox that,
Okay.
it usually, there's got to be a program where you take it to a different level and really give that a chance.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to that, then we'll work with somebody at the VA on a larger scale program. So the vets come back and forth between the VA, they'll go to the VA for their doctors, especially if they're service connected. If they're not service connected, which means they don't get any benefits from the VA, then we pay for those medical treatments that they need through funding from the government and also private individual funders and foundations.
Once the vets have completed the programs, do you guys give any type of counseling for like their children that they may have them trying to like reconnect that relationship? Because like, yeah, the vet goes through a lot, but if they have children that have seen that absence, they went through that trauma as well. So you guys like do any type of partnership with anyone that will help them with counseling?
We do. We don't do that in our facility here because it's an all-male facility. We don't mix genders for a lot of reasons. But in our permanent supportive housing locations where the gentlemen are either living on their own or reuniting with their family, their wives, spouses, or some of their kids, there are treatments available through the case managers at those locations. So they'll make sure that they're getting family counseling and kind of talking through those issues, because that's a big piece of it too, is trust. It's like, how do I know that you're not going to start drinking again or start using again, and I don't want my children to go through that again. So there is a lot of time that's spent with the families at the permanent supportive locations.
First of all, thank you for the essential work that you do. So I understand you don't represent the VA, but that doesn't deter me from asking this question. So that is a huge, tremendous piece of property. And it seems like so much more could be done there to provide housing for people in need. Can you update us on, is anything more in the works, under consideration? What should we be doing? Should we be advocating in some way? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first I think my thoughts are, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but I feel like the VA does a really good job of tying our hands, even though we're on the VA campus. As if, for instance, we're not allowed to fundraise on the campus. The only reason we exist is to raise money to help homeless veterans off the street and into programs. Why they would not let us fundraise on the campus is bizarre to me. But they fall back on this 1972 or 82 ruling about no fundraising on the VA campus, and sometimes they hold people to that. It's very frustrating. The housing situation is very frustrating too. They've got a number of buildings on the campus that are just empty and sitting there, and they've got 1,200 people on a waiting list. Now they are building a temporary shelter, which will house 100 beds under one of those giant white tents that you see them erecting when they go overseas. That'll be 100 veterans, 50 men and 50 women, which is already their first mistake because they shouldn't be mixing the men and the women due to a lot of sexual trauma issues. That's the main reason why men and women should be separated. And they're building it literally right next door to our building, even though they have 388 acres to put it on. They're putting it right next to ours, which is then also right next to the state home, which is the retirement home for some of the vets as well. So from our perspective, it's frustrating because we don't feel like we're getting the support that we need to really facilitate the work that we're doing, which is why we have to go outside the VA, go outside the government, and raise additional funds to cover these costs. What I would recommend doing is, talking to either the congressman or the people at the VA and asking them, where are you with your master plan? They have a master plan that's supposed to turn and build something like 1,200 units on the campus. And when they're going to pull the trigger on that, we don't know.
That master plan is right now some public discussion. It's been completed.
Mm-hmm.
It's a public discussion now. So everyone here can read that and you can have your input on it. So now is your input on it. I think the public input is going to expire pretty soon.
Yeah.
So something that might, chamber maybe get up to people possibly.
Thank you. And, I'm not bad mouthing the VA. They do a good service, I think. It's just, there's a lot of red tape that is involved when it comes to just the good work that we're trying to do. And it's not just us. There's other organizations that handle the safe parking and food for the veterans. And there's always a push and a pull between the VA as to where we can give those services, where we can provide those. For instance, they didn't want to have one of the organizations wanted to put a refrigerator out in the safe parking so they could keep the food that was perishable in the refrigerator, and they weren't allowed to do that. So it's just challenging.
Speaking of red tape, if you find neighborhoods resistant to you putting permanent supportive housing in their neighborhoods, has that been an issue?
It has been an issue in some neighborhoods, yes. So what we do is we'll hold a town hall meeting, and then we'll have residents come in, and we'll have people that have been living next to other resident facilities and come in and talk about what that means. Because the first thought that people come into their mind is, they're going to be walking around drunk, and they're going to be doing their drugs, and they're going to molest my kids. And it's like, it's not, that doesn't happen. So it's about re-education, but we do get some pushback in certain neighborhoods, certainly. Any other questions? Sorry.
What motivates you to do what you do at New Directions?
When I see the veterans, I've been there for 2 years, just about a year and a half. And when I first came in to interview, I met a gentleman, giant African-American guy, he was taller than me, bigger than me. And I just parked the car, I was going in for an interview, and he talked to me for about 5 minutes. I wanted to know why I was there, what I was doing, what my experience was. He told me his story, and it was very moving. I feel like I'm a really mission-driven person, and when I go to work for an organization, I have to believe in the mission, because if you don't believe in it, you can't sell it. But to see these guys and to hear what they've gone through, and that they were